What's up guys, I'm Joel Dodge, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be showing you how to record great vocals. Let's get into it. So guys, I have a few things I want to say before we get into the video. And first off, I am releasing a new single next week called About Love. And I'm actually going to be showing you some of the vocals that are recorded for that song as an example for this video. So the second thing I want to say is I do all my home recordings on iPad Pro, and that is what I'm going to be using in this video to demonstrate this for you guys. But the tips I'm giving you, it doesn't matter if you're using an iPad, a phone, a computer, they're going to be the same regardless. So guys, the first thing I want to say is that to get a good recording of vocals, you actually have to sound good. And I'm not saying that to say that some people can sing and some people can't. That's actually not what I believe at all. I know personally when I first started singing, I sounded terrible. But there are things you can do that will make you a better singer and therefore make you sound better whether you're live or you're recording yourself. So I want to give you a few pointers on how to sing properly and how to sound good while you're singing. First thing that I'll say about vocals is it's just like any other instrument. You need to practice. You wouldn't expect to be a great guitar player overnight. You shouldn't expect to be a great vocalist overnight. These are the two things that I think you should be thinking about while you're practicing or trying to sing. So the first one is breathing. This is probably the most important part of singing. Basically, when you're singing, you actually need to breathe from your stomach, from your gut, I guess you could say. And I know that might sound weird and you might be like, well, what do you mean by that? It's typically when we breathe from our chest. But the problem with that when we're singing is that your chest can't compress your lungs as powerful as your stomach can. Typically when we're talking, we do just use our chest expanding and contracting, right? But when you're singing, you actually want to do that with your stomach. And a really easy way to practice this, which will take some practice for you to intentionally sing with your stomach instead of your chest, is by laying down flat on your back and putting something on your stomach, whether it's a book or your phone or something like that, and just breathe. Just make sure that you're intentionally lifting whatever that thing is up and down every time you breathe. If you practice this a few times, it's going to help you be able to control your stomach while you're singing. The second thing that will help you sing significantly better is actually focusing on how it feels more than you focus on how it sounds. I know that sounds weird, but this has had one of the biggest impacts on the way that I sing and be able to sing better. This is the thing, is when you're singing, you're not hearing yourself directly. Have you ever heard a recording of yourself talking and you just feel like you sound so much different than you think you sound? That's because when you're hearing yourself, you're actually hearing it through the structure of your skull into your ears, which is a much different sound than what other people hear coming out of your mouth. So the way that you can know that you sound good to other people is by paying attention to how it feels while you sing. When you're singing, you shouldn't feel any tension in your throat. It should feel as if the air is just flowing out of your body. And I know for me, this is one of the main things that I pay attention to while I'm singing. If there's anything that feels tight or restricted or feels like uncomfortable, then I know that I probably don't sound good to the people who are listening to me or the microphone. So when I was talking about practicing, those are the two things that you should practice. Your breathing and making sure that it feels good while you sing. The last thing I want to tell you guys about singing is that you should warm up before you sing. And it's super important to do this. Just like a track star wouldn't go run a 100-meter dash without warming up first because they could hurt their legs, they could do some serious damage to their body. It's the same thing with your vocal cords. If you aren't warming up your vocal cords before you're putting them through intense activity like singing, you could actually damage your vocal cords. And not only that, you sound better when you're warmed up, just like a track runner runs faster when they're warmed up. So I'm not going to go in depth into different warm-ups or anything like that. There are some great videos on YouTube that you can watch, and I would recommend watching some of those and finding some routines that you like doing. My personal favorite is the motorboat. The reason the motorboat is such a great warm-up is because it makes you implement the first two things I was talking about. The motorboat goes like this. And basically, that's what the motorboat is. But what's so great about the motorboat is that to push enough air to make your lips flop like that, you actually have to engage your stomach. So you're actually making yourself engage your stomach instead of breathing from your chest. The other thing is that when you're doing the motorboat, you should feel a tingly sensation right here around your nose. And what that means is that everything is flowing properly. If you feel that tingly sensation, then that means you're not having any hangups in your throat. You're letting everything flow properly the way you're supposed to when you sing. That's all my tips for singing good. Let's talk about recording those vocals. First off, I would recommend most people get a condenser mic like this one. Dynamic mics can be good for vocals too, but typically you have to spend quite a bit more. Get something like the SM7B or something like that, where you can get much better quality out of cheaper condenser microphones. Second thing about recording good vocals is you're going to want to keep a little distance. So if I was singing into this mic, which I don't have it plugged in right now, I'm going to be showing you guys what this sounds like afterwards in my new project that I've been working on. Keep a little distance from the mic. You're going to want to be somewhere between 6 inches to a foot away from the mic. If you get too much further away from that, you're going to start sounding too thin and maybe even echoey. But if you get too close to the mic, you're going to start sounding too like there's too much bass frequency in your voice. So somewhere 6 inches to a foot away is going to be your sweet spot for vocals. Something that I do feel like is worth mentioning is that sound treatment in the room you're in is a big deal. And to be honest with you, my room could actually use some better sound treatment. Something a producer told me one time that has kind of stuck with me, and I definitely think is true. If you only have a limited amount of sound treatment, you're going to be better off having it behind you. And the reason for that is that most of what the mic picks up is from in front of it. Having that foam behind you is going to help get rid of as many of those reflections that are bouncing straight back into the front of the mic as possible. And of course, when it comes to sound treatment, we all would like to have really nice foam and bass traps and all that stuff. Just use what you have. If you only have blankets, use blankets. Do whatever you can to have some sound absorption in the room that you're singing in. This last tip I'm going to give you, I actually learned it from Colt Caparoon. He's a YouTube music producer, and if you don't follow him, you definitely should. But this is something he talks about in one of his videos that I thought was really great. And it's when you're singing high notes, you're going to get louder. That's just how it goes. When you're singing high notes, you're going to get louder. And the tendency of most singers, and myself included in this, is to pull back from the mic. So say I was normally singing right here. When I would hit a high note, I would pull back so that I'm not blasting the mic with that high note because I get so much louder. But what he recommends doing is instead of pulling back, you just turn your head to the side. And you just do it like about 45 degrees. And what that does is instead of you blasting the mic directly with that loud high note, makes it where the mic can handle increase in volume from you. But the other thing that's really important about this technique is that it allows you to retain all the bass frequencies that your body is producing when you're hitting the high notes. Which something that you'll know is that when you're hitting those high notes, there's not as much bass in your voice anyway, because you're moving from your body and your chest producing the noise to your head voice. And so you not moving back is super important for your voice to retain the bass frequencies. Anyway, that tip is so great. You should definitely practice that, implement that. I know for me, I'm still working on it. A lot of times, especially when I'm singing live, I still want to pull back. But yeah, it sounds so much better if you just practice moving to the side a little bit. So guys, let's get into this project I've been working on, and I'll show you how all these different techniques sound.
Okay guys, what I decided to do is take the end of a verse and the beginning of a chorus to have a part where I'm in my deeper vocal range and then going up to my higher vocal range for the chorus. And as you can see here, I actually only have 2 vocal tracks. I have a good example and a bad example. The bad example is of me being pulled back from the microphone for the high notes and stuff. I did try to record one of me being too close to the microphone, but it kept overloading the mic and I just wasn't able to actually get a good recording of it. So I just completely scrapped that. Don't get too close to the mic. You'll overload it. It won't sound good. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a listen to these just so you can hear kind of the difference between the two. I don't have any effects on these vocals, so you can really hear exactly what I was getting when I was singing into the mic. We're going to start with the good vocal track.
Everyone's trying to fall in love. It's not something that you fall into. Love is when you choose to care for someone else more than yourself. That's the thing about love. It's not something you can fake. When it's real, you can't mistake it. You can't mistake it.
But you can hear that when I got to this higher section here, when I say that's the thing about love, I turn my head and you can hear that it doesn't overload the microphone, but you can also hear that it keeps most of the body that I had in these parts where I was singing in a deeper register. So let's take a listen to this bad example I have.
Everyone's trying to fall in love. It's not something that you fall into. Love is when you choose to care for someone else more than yourself. That's the thing about love. It's not something you can fake. When it's real, you can't mistake it. You can't fake it. That's the thing about love. It's not something you can fake. When it's real, you can't mistake it. You can't fake it.
So there's 2 main things that you hear in this bad track, and first is just a lot of room noise, which adds this weird muddiness to the mid-range, but also kind of adds this unwanted reverb. And of course, sometimes you want to put reverb on a vocal track, but you don't want it to be baked into the original vocal. The other thing that you hear is when I get to the chorus part, because I wasn't turning my head and I wasn't close enough, you actually just lose a lot of clarity, and that's just across the board, highs, mids, everything. The vocal just didn't seem as clear. And then the other really big takeaway is that you lose almost all the bass that's in your voice when you're that far away from the mic. And you'll see if you go back and listen that in the good track, even though I was hitting high notes, I was still retaining a lot of the warmth and bass frequencies that my voice was producing.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely be watching out for my new song coming out next week called About Love. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. But as always, die empty. I'll catch you in the next one.